This is our session on intersectionality. We have our wonderful guest speakers today. Uh, Vanessa Schwabi from A Second Voice, Rina Anand, and Sarah McCulloch from the Autistic Empire. And, we are hoping to hear from them in a few minutes. Perhaps, in the first instance, Vanessa, if I can come to you first, could you tell a little about yourself and the work you do?
Okay, so my name is Vanessa Swaby. Um, I started a second voice due to my middle child Nathaniel, who's 23 now, diagnosed autistic ADHD in 2008 at the age of 5, 6. The journey was basically I wasn't believed, and at the time I didn't see it as me being a black mother. So I know I have to keep saying to everybody, it's just that I felt that he was just a nightmare. But then jumping ahead, my youngest daughter, Michaela, is 19. She was diagnosed 10 years later after her brother. And then my oldest daughter, who's 24, she was diagnosed in the last three weeks with ADHD, dyslexia and dyspraxia. And that's due to her going to university, and they could see that she was struggling. And then I was diagnosed in 2022 autistic. People feel I've got ADHD as well, but to me, I always say to everybody, I'm not one to celebrate it because I'm still me, and I feel that I'm always trying to say to everybody, my journey will be very different to any black autistic person I've met because I don't tick the box. I think my journey's always been very different, and I'm about the community. And also, I've recently become one of the Anna Freud associates, where I'm part of the Autism Central. So my role now is where I'm doing more family support, looking at the older autistic people and people within the Black Asian community and mature parents, because everybody always seems to focus on the children. And I've seen through transition how my life has been impacted by not being believed across everybody, not just within the white community, the Black community as well.
Yes, thank you, Vanessa. Rina, same question. Tell about yourself and your work.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Marie, for bringing in. Always, I must say, because I hold Vanessa in very high regard. I've known Vanessa for a while now, and it's always wonderful to share space with you, Vanessa. So lovely to see you today, and lovely to see all of you and be here with you today. So yes, I'm Rina, and I am an autistic and ADHD South Asian neurodiversity consultant. Um, and coach, neurodiversity coach, and also social entrepreneur based in the UK. And I work with organisations across education, corporate, charity, and public sectors to create neuro-affirming environments, but which are also culturally responsive, because the neurodiversity paradigm is quite Western centric, quite Eurocentric, and even the assessments and all of this was created a long time ago without really looking at cultural responsiveness or even looking at gender. It was really focused on males, and so I essentially help organizations ensure that whatever neurodiversity work they're doing doesn't inadvertently leave people from the global majority or from other intersections behind. And my motivation for that, because this was not my career before. I used to be a lawyer, then I was an ombudsman, and I used to specialize in race and disability discrimination cases. But my motivation behind the complete career change and doing this work is, as a mother of two children, one who is autistic, one who is autistic ADHD and has PDA, meant that I was facing barriers in every single realm I ventured into. And and the more literature I read, the more research I did, the more I learned how disparate the outcomes were for people from different backgrounds. And so I wanted to combine my professional experience with my living experience and academic research to help not only educate, but also to inspire some change so that all neurodivergent people have equitable opportunities to be their best selves in society.
Thank you. We'll come back to some of these points later. Sarah.
Hello. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. I didn't start on mute, so I wasn't sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah McCulloch, and I run the Autistic Empire. You can check it out at autisticempire.com. We're an organization that is about creating tools and creating a community around the idea of creating tools and services for other autistic people. We've been running about since about 2018, and I think we've got about 100 people across 4 countries. The reason that I started it is because I realized I was autistic when I was 19, and that was 15 years ago now. World looked very different then. Neurodiversity wasn't a phrase that people were bandying about. And my own diagnostic journey was deeply unpleasant. You think that autistic service waiting lists are long now. Back then, they mostly didn't exist. And so I was bouncing around service to service trying to get special funding. And eventually we went private. And I went to this meeting where I spent 90 minutes with this man probing my life, looking for problems. And then at the end of it, I got the piece of paper telling me what I already knew. And I left that office and looked back at it and thought, I don't ever want anyone to experience what I went through. And so I jumped in my intended career of working in digital marketing, became an occupational therapist, and I've spent the last decade working on building the necessary authority to influence healthcare. And I'm now, I've worked around a range of settings because I was a locum. I ended up in older people's. I worked in schools. I worked in community. I worked in acute, learning disability, schools. And so I've seen autistic people across the spectrum, as it were, in most stages of the life cycle. And I currently work in Barnet for a 18 to 25 transition pathway. And what I didn't realise when I took that job is that nearly everyone coming over from CAMS into adult services is neurodivergent in one way or another. So that's been very informative. And I've been working on developing in my own workplace tools and services to benefit that cohort of people, which then gets fed out to the Autistic Empire work as well. I had a student, an OT student this summer, and I got her to develop a sensory pathway toolkit for the benefit of the OT pathways. And I said to her, do you mind if I release this online? Because I don't want it to get lost into the NHS bowels. She said, yes, that's on the Autistic Empire website for everyone who's a citizen to download. So that's the kind of work that I do.
Thank you. Could you tell us about the Autistic Empire a little bit more?
Yeah, so the Autistic Empire goes where the people who are involved in it at the time want to go. And so, we go to events when people ask us to events and talk about the autistic experience. We had one of our citizens had a problem at an airport, so we developed customizable alert cards for you to be able to carry around to identify your specific needs. I've noticed on many occasions that ideas that we originally came up with and pushed out into the autistic community turn up without credit on other websites or businesses, which I'm completely fine with, because I read a statistic earlier this week that from the NHS that indicates that prevalence of undiagnosed autistic people is somewhere in the region of 89% in above 25s. And I've long argued that no one knows that they're autistic, and this is a major problem when it comes to mobilizing our community and advocating for ourselves, because the vast majority of the people that we need to have involved don't know that they're autistic. And so we spend a lot of time thinking about how can we tell people. So we've got an autism test on our website. That's probably the most visited page. We've got a bunch of follow-up tests, ADHD, sensory stuff, and then trying to think around kind of like what can we do that's going to help people once they have realised. And so We did research called the Grand Sensory Survey in 2019, saying based on the question, how can you identify someone who's autistic without using the current diagnostic tools of poking around in people's lives trying to find out what's wrong with them. And we were like, well, can we go off sensory needs? And so we asked the question, do autistic people have identifiably unique sensory needs? And we had to go back further because it turned out that no one really knows the prevalence of most sensory experiences at all. Like, it's completely unknown how many people have a sense of smell, for example. So we did some research around that, and then we ended up getting a major sensory processing charity in America involved, who really flung it out for us, and then we wrote that up and published it. And so that's the kind of thing that we do. We've currently got a monthly meeting called Monday One, where people can come together and sort of talk about what's on their mind, and build community, out of which come ideas that we then implement. And that's fundamentally our approach.
Okay, thank you. So, Vanessa, you mentioned that your journey is different one. Different from what? And in what way is it different?
Okay, I'll always put a disclaimer, so this is my experience. So basically, if anybody talks to me about autism from within the Black community, I think because my experience was that I worked in television, my circle of my connectors were mainly within the white community. So when my son, in regards to his behavior, was being exhibited, nobody was accepting, when he got the diagnosis of autism, he was autistic. I would be told that he was just naughty. So you hear the same thing: he was naughty, he was unruly. It's my parenting skills, but because me and his dad broke up, maybe that's the reason why he was acting the way he was. If I was in the white community, I got the help, but the only difference is that if I did be around other Black families, a lot of them never spoke about the biting, the slapping, the verbal abuse, all the challenges I had with my son. It was like they didn't want to talk about it. But if the child had more, like highly intelligent people, the more support those families. But then when it came to my son, I just saw he was the nightmare. I called him Dennis the Menace, the Black version, because it means I couldn't take him nowhere. But I felt more accepted in the white community because that's where I learned to understand what autism was. But the challenges I had way back in 2008 was when I did go into spaces, I was predominantly the only Black mother. But then if I did meet with other families, they were either African or they were Somalian, and I didn't fit into either. So I was always sort of standing out on my own. So I sort of created my own space, and that's why I called it a second voice, because it wasn't, for me, I always say to everybody, it wasn't the color of the skin that was my issue. It was the fact of everywhere I went, my family, my friend, the church, going down the road, going to the shop, no matter where I was with my son, everybody made comments. So I had to isolate myself from everybody. But then 2020, pre-COVID, post-COVID, now I'm hearing lots of people saying the same thing. But I'm always trying to correct people to say, when they say, a Second Voice is a Black organization, I said, no, I'm community-led because I focus on family. A lot of people feel that I've sold out, and I'm like, no, I haven't sold out, because at the end of the day, if a mother picks up the phone and calls me, I'm able to assist. But if there's a language barrier or cultural differences, I can't always help. So I always have to always make sure that I can find somebody to support me. But sadly, with a lot of groups, they don't want to signpost, they don't want to share the information. And by then, when the family's child gets caught up in the criminal justice system, or they end up in an inpatient, I may get those families calling me. But by then, I won't say it's too late, it's by then the child's needs have never been met, and then the crisis hits. And that's why I feel my journey has always been touch and go, very lonely, doing the best that I can, going into spaces where I feel in 2025, I'm hearing a lot of what I experienced in 2008. And I feel that in the Black community, Asian community, I think we're still very behind, because there is a lot of us, like me and Rena, we're doing the work, but we're still not getting our communities coming together. It's like we're still alien. You know, they'll see us, they'll probably get us to come and speak, but guarantee doesn't mean that they're going to implement what they've learned. And I'm saying that from my heart, because in 2025, I still shouldn't keep and see reading. There's no support for us in the Black community, or there's no support with us in the Asian community, because I know lots of people. I could bring them together, and I will say that's incorrect. It's because people are not sharing the information. That's me. I'm sorry. I'm not gonna pretty up. I said to everybody, autism isn't something I can wave the flag and celebrate, because I'm still the same person I was before I had the diagnosis. But when I look at my daughter, who was diagnosed like 4 weeks ago, if she had got that diagnosis when she was in primary school, secondary, and her running away at 14 to come back at 16 pregnant, and I had to deliver my grandson at home with my husband, who I'm married to now, a lot of that wouldn't have happened if people listened to me in the beginning. It's not about, well, we think your daughters are copying their brother, but then when you got family members, friends, my ex-partner, everybody around me just was against this word autism. So I think now in 2025, I'm just more about, again, it's about connecting. And I always say to everybody, it's about unlearning what you know and relearn, because at the end of the day, autism affects everybody exactly the same. But if I went in the room as a Black mother, my son acted a certain way, they'll see the color of my son's skin, they'll see the behavior. And if I said he's autistic, I would get, the child just needs a little slap in a box and he needs to fix up. And that would be, in the Black space. But then I've heard a lot of Asian families, again, it's again, when you talk about Asian community, again, it's not just Asian. You've got to look at the Chinese community, you've got to look at the Pakistan community, you got to look at the Indian community, the Bangladesh community. And that's why I feel that when people talk about we can speak for all, we can't, because I've seen the damage that has caused a lot of families, because certain groups don't want to talk about race, and that's within the Black and Asian community. So when you go into the white spaces, I can talk very openly, because I don't do it in a way to make people feel uncomfortable. I'm just saying, I don't feel my voice is being heard. Can you help me? And they will help me with the autism. But when it came to the cultural perspective, I still couldn't go to my community, because when my son, as he says, when he was older, a lot of people were trying to say it was my fault the way he was. Again, if our children can speak for themselves, more chance, if they say something, believe them. But if you've got a child who is unable to speak, unable to communicate, they've got all this behavior, they can say what they want. And social services, agencies can come in and make the assumption, remove the child, and the child's still going to grow up a certain way, because nobody is accepting this diagnosis of autism, ADHD, PDA, whatever it is that's hidden associated to behaviors. Nobody seems to want to accept it unless the child can speak, speak eloquently. Was it eloquent? I can say it. Very articulate. They can speak very clearly and recite poems, and that's what people more look at. They're not interested in the go-between, like the ones that can't speak, the ones that rock, the ones that smear. They're not interested in that. They're only interested in the more intellectual autistic people. And that's what I've picked up. A lot of families that have said to me, we don't fit in nowhere, whether they're Black or white or Asian. Sorry.
Thank you. Rina, if I can come to you, you spoke about cultural competence, you had a word. Could you tell about this? What this means, and what the issues are, and what the solutions are?
Yeah. Well, I mean, solutions. There's never going to be kind of a one size all solution. The concept of intersectionality is really looking not just at people's intersecting identities. So, for example, their race, their gender, their faith, but actually how these come together and compound with the existing structural barriers that already exist in society. So, for example, you may well have, say, South Asian young people who have not been allowed to really express their traits that give away that they may be neurodivergent in the home, which is supposed to be a safe space. And then they'll end up, in a workplace and still feel that they can't do that. And they already know, because society is biased. We all are biased. Just some of us know about it and are doing something about it, and others are blissfully unaware. Um, that there are certain things you can hide. So I can't hide the fact that I'm brown, and I will face discrimination because of that. But if I already know that, then I'm not going to be telling everybody about my neurodivergence or seeking a diagnosis, because I don't want to be doubly discriminated against. And this is not just my opinion. This is what the research around this space, particularly research that's come out from Birkbeck University for the last couple of years, is showing that there is a higher level of neurodivergent global majority people intending to leave the workplace because they don't feel psychologically safe. So in answer to your questions, Maria, one of the things I guess is worth pointing out is this starts very early. A paper that was published by Cambridge and Newcastle universities back in around 2021, which looked at the outcomes for about 7 million school children, of whom 120,000 were autistic, showed that the highest prevalence was in Black, Asian, and Chinese families, but there was a disproportionate level of intervention and support for those children. So it starts very early, and what we can see is where there are multiple factors. So if we look at, say, privilege and the amount of power people have in situations, if you are from a lower socioeconomic background and you are Muslim, and maybe English is not your first language, you have so many barriers to get over to access the support for you as a family, for you, for your child, that it makes for a very painful journey. And then when you add in the cultural stigma, which does still exist amongst many communities, and this again, it goes really deep. I'll stop talking in a minute to just allow you to kind of ask some more questions. But we have to remember that there's a lot of pain and trauma for many communities that is in our DNA. Families who historically, were settled and things were working, who were viciously uprooted and had to relocate and build a new life in an unfamiliar, location with unfamiliar people who were told they were not wanted, who experienced, really rife racism. Now they have channeled, and I'm speaking particularly from a South Asian context, that they've channeled their energy, through their children to enable them to be stable and financially secure and all of this stuff. When you then dangle this threat of neurodivergence, it poses a real threat to this existence of what they have spent decades trying to build up. And so there's a lot of dialogue which I try to facilitate around why it's not a threat, how it's not about covering it up or trying to comply and mask, because actually that just leads to burnout and poorer mental well-being. And actually, as communities who are brilliant at coming together when there's a marriage or a death or any other type of thing, we're not seeing that same strength of community come together, even, and in particular in faith spaces as well, when we have the concept of disability in our midst. It's not, we don't have that yet, but we need to, and we're capable, but I think there's just a lot of people who don't know how.
Yeah.
Did I answer that question?
Yes, you did. Absolutely.
I mean, if anyone, obviously there's like so much, but if there's anything anyone kind of wants to share or comment on, please do just make a note of it or pop it in the chat, and we can, I'm sure we'll have time for Q&A after as well.
Yeah. Sarah,
Yeah.
So I'm just going to put
you
this alarm
also have other intersectional identities, and I'm aware you have friends, you have, you're connected to lots of people with LGBTQ plus intersectional identities. What is LGBTQ plus experience? What is how does it interact with autism in terms of the experience of society as we know
It's interesting. I I keep getting asked to, because I'm queer and very visibly gender non-conforming, and so I'm very much marked out as a weirdo from the get-go. And choices, and ultimately, like, you have to make choices about kind of like whether you want to embrace that or sit in the corner. And I was very much like, I'm going to embrace that, and take the disadvantages that comes with in stride. And I ultimately made the same choice around being autistic. Um, I didn't tell anyone that I was autistic at work until I think 2021, when I was promoted sufficiently far that like there was nothing that anyone could do about it. And then as soon as I did tell people, I absolutely experienced discrimination. Like, people, things slip out. I did an autism training, and someone, an hour of neuroaffirming. Here is what autistic people are like. Here are how to work with autistic service users. Here are the things to think about. Autistic people don't all have learning disabilities, that kind of thing. And someone sat through an hour of that, and then rang me up and said, "Oh, thank you so much for telling me about how you've like overcome your learning disability. It was really inspirational." And I was like, this is not helpful. And I don't think it went in. And the reason I mention this is just because, it's interesting when people are like, oh, what's it like being queer and autistic? And I just have to say, well, 70% is the latest statistic on how many autistic people are non-heterosexual. Like, being queer mostly is the autistic experience, and there's a handful of like straight autistic men in the corner. But they're the ones that everyone thinks about. And so, you know, it's interesting to me that within the autistic community, people have this sense of intersectionality, wherein like we've replicated the same minority groups in the same percentages of the population, or assumed that to be the case. And actually, like, I don't think that is true. Like, I think that straight people are a minority in the autistic community, and if we're going to be setting up special groups to discuss sexual identity, like, they should probably have one. And but then you have to like consider the reality that like the majority of the world is not the autistic community yet. And as soon as I step out of my lovely queer autistic bubble, in which like that's not an issue and the main sort of argument is like polyamory or not, then you just step back into like the regular world of people being a bit mindlessly homophobic. And I'm Jewish, and it's a constant like choice for me around kind of like, do I want to go and be in a more traditional Jewish community where there are very firm gender lines and expectation of behavior that like I can never meet up because I can never meet because I'm just not that person. Like, I'm a fairly fluent, articulate person when I'm like in the familiar places that I've carved out for myself, but like put me at a cocktail party and I do get weird. And so like I can't do that in a religious community that like just prizes conformity in that way. And I'm currently a member of an Orthodox synagogue, and I go there and I'm just kind of like, it's a very deliberately welcoming, accommodating community, which is why I go there. But it's nonetheless very obvious when I go there that I'm not one of them. And there is that reality that you have to live with, that's that's true whether you're coming from like your queer identity or from your autistic identity. There's I am stepping outside of my comfort zone. Like, I will always be a minority. But for me, I that's how I feel in traditional Jewish spaces. But if I go into progressive Jewish spaces, I'm just vastly more religious than everyone there. Like, I am like traditional by practice, and so I just end up in this situation where like wherever I go, I'm always going to be a slightly uncomfortable minority. I'm intellectually, I'm completely reconciled to that. Like, I've made my choices. Like, I had a school counselor who said to me, like, you can choose to be kind of like low in group or high out group, and I ultimately chose high out group. Like, you know, take me or leave me, but like, I am who I am, and some people are attracted to that, and and other people feel very threatened by that. But like, it's ultimately a choice that I was forced into, and not of my own volition. And I think like that's the experience of most people who have intersecting identities, and what's the phrase, guys? Double oppression,
Empathy.
huh?
Is that empathy?
No, 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 no. When you have a dual identities that are oppressed,
Double discrimination or double
double
marginalization.
discrimination. Yes, when you have to live with the reality of double discrimination, like basically everywhere you go, I think is very common for all autistic people. The question is just like, what's your secondary oppression?
Yeah. What uh, what support is available? What are good, for people listening to us? What are good sources of support? What are good groups? Where to turn? Yeah, if people identify with any of these identities or where could they turn?
I suppose it depends on what you're asking because it's very wide. So if somebody said to me, I'm autistic and I'm an elderly, there's nothing for me, then I know that there's only a few black autistic people that is my age, 55 plus. So the person that I use always Cosmichael because I think her lived experience for years, being 65, she'll be my go-to person. Color doesn't come into it for me for many reasons because not everybody's, some people are still on their journey and it doesn't mean they're going to get it right. So I go to the people that have empowered me, who's inspired me, who's influenced me and what they've done. So I feel Cosmichael is one for the elderly. If it comes to people in the black community, I would say there's Autism Voice based in Lambeth. Then you got Melissa Simmons, she's based in Sheffield. You got Wada Farah, who's based in Lewisham. Then you've obviously got Rena. I'm not sure what area she's from, but I know you've got Rena for the South Asia. Then you've got Hazel Lim, who's based in Wales, and hers is Chinese Autism UK. I could reel off a whole heap of people, but doesn't mean that when you go to a lot of the people within the community, they're not aware of these organizations because nobody's putting it on their Send Local Offer or Age UK. It's like a lot of the NHS, was it not the CCGs, the ICBs, the social prescribing, I don't think they're really tapping into the organizations that are making change. And the reason why I can say that, 13 years I've been fighting hard, and it frustrates me to know when somebody comes and says, I've never met a black person before, but they're all out there. It's not that we're not there, we're there. I know, Maria, how you've met me, the autism show. It's not there. People are not outreaching, or people set up their groups, but it's that cliquey thing of, we don't want nobody in your space. And I think it's the cliquey thing, I think, is a barrier for lots of families, because if you don't look like me, then you're not going to let in. I accept anybody. I don't care who you are. If you've got autism, you think you're autistic and you need help, the door is open. I'm not going to say I can't help you because you don't look like me, because at the end of the day, loneliness, isolation is very frustrating. So I always say to everybody, just because somebody's black or they're Asian doesn't mean that they can help you, because they may be still on that journey. And I have to always put a disclaimer. It's not I'm saying that the people out there are not doing their job, but there's been a lot of damage if people don't know what autism is. And if I needed somebody who's a lawyer or somebody who's in the corporate world, I'll probably more go to Rena, or there's Aaliyah Lewis, who's a solicitor. I have to go to certain people for different communities, because I've got some families will say to me, if somebody doesn't look like them, meaning if somebody's black and they dress a certain way, but they don't dress that way, those families don't want to tap in, especially if they don't speak their language. So we have to be so careful. Just because somebody says they're there for the black or Asian community, you have to dig a little bit deeper, because as I've always said, just because somebody says they're an autistic advocate doesn't mean they can advocate for me. And I think that's why I get frustrated with, well, Rena knows what I'm like on social media. If something is not right, I won't call it out. I just look, read, but it doesn't mean I'm going to share it. That's me. I don't share just because, yeah, I'm very cautious
Yeah.
what I share. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
But yeah, I think you're right, Vanessa. I think, that somehow the mud sticks worse or longer when you're also from multiply marginalized backgrounds. So you think even harder before you share stuff, which is a lot of the reason why, together with cultural conditioning as well, that people, particularly from the South Asian community, are reluctant to share what's going on for them. I think so. Just to add to that, I think so. Part of the problem, I think, is that we have some great people doing some great work, but it's very volunteer led. It's severely underfunded, and so people don't know about them. It's very anecdotal. There is, for example, some amazing work going on in Southall, that's going through one of their gurudwaras, which is a massive space, but they've created an entirely a whole kind of autism friendly offer for people. And there are similar things going on, but people don't know about them in all of the places where you might look for on a directory. There's also just not enough research. People always talk about the barriers and being hard to reach, but actually,
Not to
I
reach.
I have yet to meet a parent. I mean, most of my work is with global majority. The parent side of work is mostly with global majority parents, and I haven't met a parent yet that is not all in for their child, that is not prepared to completely upend, their lifestyle or the way they do things at home in order to create a better outcome for their child. So, there's this. It's a very convenient narrative that that people who maybe don't speak English as their first language are somehow less invested, because it's a load of nonsense, quite frankly. But the problem is, lots of things which are shared are just not culturally responsive. So, for example, I'll give you a couple of examples just to kind of, and forgive me, because lots of my examples are always related to kind of younger children, but part of that is also that support after transition kind of seems to fall off a cliff. And so, whatever there is for children, whatever little there is anyway, there's even less as a South Asian autistic adult out there. But a couple of examples. So there was a parent who was Muslim, and she was having some OT therapy with her for her child, and the OT came and said, "You just need to get some drums, play these drums, get your child to play these drums at home." Now, they were Orthodox Muslim, and music in their household was haram, but there was no cultural awareness of this OT to think that actually, even to ask, is this an appropriate intervention that you could facilitate at home? And so here we have like people kind of merrily going on their way without really thinking about, is the person in front of me, does their background, their circumstances, their faith, any other, parts of their intersecting identities, is there anything that may not work for them? Similarly, if you think about like the assessment questions, they'll often refer to things like, does your child do they know how to do patter cake? The very old traditional, thing you do with your hands. And so many, South Asian and global majority parents have no concept of this, because we sing other songs, we do other things with our children. That's not one of our things. And it's so baked in that people then draw their own narratives that we're disinterested or not invested, but actually we have to work really, really much harder in order to get people to really see us and support our children. So yes, there is some great stuff happening, but it's just not very well connected, and certainly there's not enough research.
I think going back to the question of, where can people go to get support, I think, there's some pessimistic answers from the others, and I have to largely agree in that the greatest problem that I have, as both an autistic advocate and as a mental health professional who gets this question all the time, is that what people are looking for does not exist. And people will say, where can I go? And you can point someone to a website, you can point someone to a book or a talk that they can go to. But like, in my view, and this is why I established the Autistic Empire in the first place, what people are looking for is a community, and a building that they can walk into and sort of cry on someone or say hello or do that kind of thing. And to the extent that that exists, as my fellow speakers have noted, like it is mainly oriented around parents. Like, where do you go if you're an autistic adult, and you want to meet people like you, and you want to get some answers to some questions or some, mentoring about how to be as an autistic person in the world. Like, such places exist like that are fleeting, unorganized, or don't last. And in the what nearly 7, 8 years that I've been running this organization, we've tried so hard, because the feedback I get back every single time you go to an event is, do you run a local group? Do you have like events that I can go to? Is, oh my God, we're trying, but like it has been so difficult to get enough people in the same place at the same time, in a space that's affordable or free, and can also accommodate the particular needs of autistic people, because you can't just create if you want to be inclusive, you can't just create an unstructured social space. Like, there has to be, various things that you have to put in place in order to allow all types of autistic people across the spectrum to attend. And it has just been so difficult, which is why we started Monday One, because eventually, after like several years of trying to find a local space in London, I was like, right, we're just going to do it online, and then we're going to try and build enough people in a particular area to be able to like hold it somewhere outside of London. And I think after 4 or 5 months of that, I think like we're maybe at the point of being able to put something up in Buckinghamshire. But it has been very, very difficult. And something that I always say in my training is that at the end of the day, like, the NHS is not coming to save you. Like, autism services are diagnostic only. You will be discharged and left to get on with it. And the only place that you can turn to for answers is the autistic community itself. And we need to step up. And start building those structures, because only we understand our people. But we don't necessarily understand autistic people of other backgrounds. And so, I've what our podcast producer Odai is very involved in talking about Black autistic intersectionality, and he's put up several episodes on the podcast that you can check out, speaking about these specific issues and info dumping about famous Black political advocates. He's just done one on W.E. Du Bois, so do check that out. But going back to the question, like, we need to come up with a better solution to that, because Odai went to, who's got the most number of organised groups in the UK? It's the National Autistic Society, and when you go there, like, it's or the way Odai explained it to me when he went was, it was very much kind of like support worker herding you around to have organized fun, and actually, like, the opportunity to connect with other people was really absent. And he was saying, he went bowling this one time, and that was kind of okay, but a bit socially awkward, which is okay. But the other time they went to the cinema, and I just can't think of a less effective way of connecting people to each other than putting them in the dark next to each other, saying nothing for 2 hours. Like, it just felt to me like there wasn't a lot of thought going into these activities, and what exactly are we trying to get out of people who've often put a lot of effort into making themselves leave the house and go to a specific place. And like, there needs to be a benefit to that. And actually, putting my OT hat on, like, you can't just create an event and have people turn up to it and just kind of like expect magic to happen, because that's not how autistic people work. Like, some autistic people work like that, particularly the ADHD ones. You can't stop them talking. But like, that's not true for a whole load of sort of like anxious autistic people who've maybe been really burned by like their past attempts to make friends. And like, it's slowly you need to create environments that allow for people who have had those experiences to be able to try things new, and to not look you in the eye, and to be able to maybe go up to you and like have a really weird opening line and kind of like test that out. And I just have not found anywhere that really does that. I will throw in that I've been told that the London Autism Group is now running 4 or 5 social cafes, they're calling them, that are running on a monthly basis in multiple locations. So I absolutely do not want to say, I can't fully endorse them just because I haven't been to one. So I can't say that people aren't trying. Like, absolutely, people are trying. Like, I've been running into people for a very long time of people, wanting to start local groups, and in some case starting local groups. Like, there was someone who'd been running a women's autistic group in Reading for 4 years, and I was like, that's really cool. And then I eventually checked in on them because I was going to put them on the Autistic Empire website. They're gone. And so what we need is, as Rena was saying, we need the research to know what it is that we need to do. And to think about and to trial new models. But then we need like the consistency to continue existing to allow word of them to spread. And I'm absolutely trying to do that with the Autistic Empire, but it's been really, really hard. And I think that that's been the experience of nearly everyone who's tried this. And autistic children become autistic adults, and seemingly like, to non-autistic people or those who would fund us, like that hasn't quite gone in yet. So it's very much a work in progress. Now, having said that, because I don't want to be like too ropey about that, if I look at my list of autistic groups, I think I generally recommend people go check out Autism training and do courses and participate in their community. There's a bunch of Facebook groups that are on the Citizens Dashboard that have tens of thousands of people in them. And although things can get very tone policey, which I understand why it happens, but like at the end of the day, like a bunch of autistic people are always going to say things that they don't mean. So, Reframing Autism, I think, is really, they're Australian, and they've really come on in the last few years in terms of like what they're providing people with. I always tell people that the first place to go for support is to go find a bunch of autistic people and go hang out with them. And then you have to go and find reputable sources for people to tell you about how to be autistic. Because if you just take the word of the first autistic person that you come across, you're going to get a unique take that might not necessarily be evidence-based. And so I think I would recommend, me as a first instance resource. But after that, I think Reframing Autism and Awesome Training are the first two places that I personally recommend to people. Awesome Training is kind of more aimed at parents of autistic children, and Reframing Autism is aimed at autistic adults. And I think those are my two initial places that I recommend people to start, rather than just Googling it and ending up on Autism Speaks or the National Autistic Society, because you shouldn't take your advice from them.
I was just going to quickly add, because I can see there's some questions coming in, and it would be good to, I think, answer some of those. As much as there is so much value in having people with a shared identity to share your experiences with, what I would also say is the more we integrate as well with one another and expand our own understanding of how autism impacts people from different backgrounds, different life experiences and things, the better it will be for everyone, because our challenges are all different, but actually I just feel like as humanity, the more we understand each other and support each other, we can also then learn from one another, and just take that, be a united voice. There's so many of us. The more united we are, the more we can push for things like more research, funding, and all of the other things that we need in order to create neuro-inclusive workplaces by design, neuro-inclusive training for teachers, which it just doesn't exist, and lots of other things too.
Yeah.
Can I answer the question for Roz?
Yes, please.
All right. How I started, as I said, I never thought in a million years I'll be doing what I'm doing, because I used to like be behind the camera. But because of how I started was I set up a parent coffee morning, and then I like to do things properly. I'm not into cutting corners. I wouldn't give anybody shabby. And then I always made sure I looked for the best of things. And then I was getting a lot of private funders, believe it or not. A Second Voice is not a charity. We were a self-help group, became a CIC, but I still got lots of donations. And through those donations, I made like £5,000 look like £20,000 because I would always buy all my equipment. So it means I didn't have to keep on borrowing from anybody. But my advice would be is in your area is what is more needed. Again, people talk about there's a lot of focus on the children. I think me being with Autism Central was based off me going everywhere, annoying people, asking questions. I didn't care if I was the only black person because all I wanted to know is how could I help my son, my daughters, and then to help the parents that were coming to me. And because I worked in television, I didn't care where I went. I just wanted the information and I took it back to the community, applied for applications, but I made sure that everything that I did was based off what I could work with. I wouldn't try and do things that wasn't my speciality because you would end up again being stuck. So with me, I went for domestic abuse and sexual abuse. So I knew that if I was talking about a survivor, overcomer to abuse, I knew I had people that could support me. But if other people tried to do it, did they have the counsellors to be put in place to support these families? So you have to make sure what you're doing, keep it simple, don't overdo it. I would just say do what you know you can work with. If you know, I mean, I don't know your history. So if you say that if you're an autistic adult, Autism Central now, I mean, it's not unplugging it because I'm one of the associates, but one thing about Autism Central now, because it's national, they've taken over from the National Autism Society. So it's Anna Freud that are running Autism Central. They're now looking to create hubs in different areas. So I know I'm going to have it in my area, but they're going to be wherever it's needed. They're looking for other people that we can train up so they can run their sessions. Because again, as Sarah was saying, Rena would know the focus is always on children, and it does annoy me because now when it comes to children, end up in CAMS or end up in the police system, and then when they get into, was it turn 18, 19, our voices don't count because now they're over to the system. So I just feel that find out what is your interest, your hobby. If it's art, if it's going for walks in the park, if it's going swimming, you name it, find something that is a speciality. And that's how you flourish. I've never had problems getting funding. I've never had problems people donating or helping me because, as I said, you have to love what you do. You have to love people. And if you do get difficult people, I think this is the autism in me. If somebody was racist to me, I wouldn't even know. And I think that's how naive I was. It's only since COVID, and now I'm hearing a lot about the experience of a lot of other Black autistic people, Asian, what they've experienced. I always say to them, I hear you, but my journey's been different. And as Rena knows me and Maria, when I'm at the autism show, I'm there for everybody. I'm bringing in everybody's different experiences because I said, I can't speak for just me, my experience. I've got to make sure everybody's voice counts because it's important that if I make a mistake, they're going to come after me. So we got to make sure, as like Rena was saying, we've got to come together. That's how I say, come together. Find out find out the interest in your area. That's what I would say. 'Cause I don't know what area that you're in.
Yeah, I mean, just to add, so on being a voice, if someone told me this is what I would have been doing, I would never, ever, ever have believed it. I had a very different life, not that long ago, actually. And I think one of the reasons it was so hard is because I was raised as in a very traditional South Asian household. Didn't make eye contact with my dad when we spoke. Like I was not allowed to wear bare armed, like anything that showed my arms or shoulders. It was a very traditional household. And so I was not at all used to advocating for myself or saying what I wanted or needed. But when I had a child who was suspended from school and I didn't feel that my child was being supported, I had to find that voice, because I knew that the trajectory for him would be disastrous if I didn't step up and advocate for him. And so, all of that, it took me till I was about 40 to actually muster up the strength and courage to start. And the way I started actually was initially I thought it must just be me that doesn't know what to do. It must just be me who doesn't know how to cope with an autistic child. And I just started writing some articles and blogs, and lo and behold, I didn't market it or anything. I just had a basic Facebook page. They were read in like 65 countries around the world. The response was just incredible. So as Vanessa was kind of alluding to as well, whatever is your area of comfort, whichever, because it's not everybody wants to go on video and just say, hey, this is me. Not everyone's comfortable with that. You can dip your toe in the water, and Sarah's kindly offered to take you through her learnings too. But I would say, you start slowly and see. And actually, I think what we'll find, because there's nowhere near enough resource out there anyway, there will be people who will be very attracted to what you're sharing and how you want to support.
Okay. I know Vanessa needs to go.
Yeah, that's the good thing about the Autism Central. They're actually doing evening sessions, and I've put myself at 8 o'clock, and I don't know why, but yeah, we're doing an 8 o'clock session. It's for the working parents or the parents who said that, or autistic adults would like to. So yeah, thank you. I'm so sorry I've got to go. But yeah, I just say, just love what you do if you want to set up your group, and find us on social media, or speak to Maria. I can send some stuff to Maria and just give you some tips, because I love what I do. I've been in it for 13 years. But yeah, thank you,
We
everybody.
love you, Vanessa, as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Let's take a few questions from the audience. Does anyone want to, because I wasn't keeping up with the chat, does anyone want to raise a question? Wait.
Thank you very much, Vanessa, who's gone sadly, Sarah, Rena. Really excellent discussion. And certainly you've highlighted some aspects of being neurodiverse that I hadn't readily thought about. But one of the questions I did put it in the chat was, most of us will have, or many of us will have been masking for much of our lives. And I see that, and correct me if my view is wrong, but I see that as trying to assimilate with the neurotypical world that we are surrounded by in order to get the things that we need, such as education and employment. And don't in any way think that I'm putting down the experience that you have if you come from another minority group, which is similarly prejudiced. But I just wonder if you could tease out for me the difference between what I've been doing as a a white male within a largely white community, and trying to pretend to be like the majority in order to get the things that I need. And if you're from an ethnic minority background, feeling that you need to behave and mimic some of the things that the majority white population are doing to assimilate and look like you're playing their game in order to get education and employment.
Such a great question, Wade. I've got some personal thoughts on it, but Sarah, did you have anything you
Oh,
wanted
you
to?
go first. You go first.
So, I mean, this is not. So usually when things I share are based on literature, but I'm going to just share this from my personal opinion, and you feel free to disagree. But for me, the difference between the two, assimilation is something that as a woman of color in society, I do like very proficiently. And that's the only way I've been able to navigate predominantly white spaces throughout my corporate career and legal career. I was one of only a handful of ombudsmen of color out of about 350. So I was very used to being in spaces where there was not anybody that looked like me. For me, the difference is when I'm assimilating, I am perhaps dialing down some of my South Asian traits to fit in. When I'm masking, um, I feel like it's more of a harmful behavior for me. It's much more suppression of what I want to be doing, really, in order that I'm fitting in better or more compliant with the surroundings. So, for example, right now I've got my blue tack, which is my thing that I fiddle with whenever I am sat for a long time, and I would not necessarily, I wouldn't take that on stage. If I was giving a conference speech or something on this topic, I wouldn't be taking that. And as much as I would want to, and it would, and maybe I could, but I still think there's still a lot more discrimination. It's a heightened form of discrimination when you're a person of color and also neurodivergent. There's less sympathy. Society doesn't find the sympathy in the same way as it would when you're white and neurodivergent. So that's, yeah, for me it's more about harm in my own. For me that's kind of what it boils down to. But Sarah, please.
Yeah, I think that was I was trying to work out how to conceptualize that, and I think that you put it really well. I think, suppressing your ethnic or religious identity and sort of assimilating into the majority is more about kind of like removing things from the public space that you would otherwise do. And masking is putting on a persona and positively doing things that you might not necessarily do. And I think I don't have anything morally against masking. I think that we all play up and play down different aspects of our characters depending on the environment that we're in and what we want. And I think if people want to go work for an investment banker and that's going to entail pretending to be much more social than they actually are, then that's the choice that they have to make. And I really what I really care about is people being able to make that choice, because I see so many people who are masking badly and don't recognize that that's what they're doing, and that psychologically messes with you. And so, I want people, if they're going to mask, to like be aware that it comes off. When it comes to being an ethnic or religious minority, I think like the best example I can give for you of that is like upcoming, which is Christmas. And I'm about to spend an entire month of people asking me what I'm doing for Christmas, and the answer is nothing, because I'm not Christian. And people are like, oh well, it's that time of the year, and I'm like, yeah, and like most of my Jewish friends are going to be having a completely ordinary day. What do you do? And you just run into things like that regularly. I've just had a month of it because there's in October there's 4 Jewish festivals that like hit like basically one a week, and like having to explain to people that yes, I'm taking more time off work to go celebrate a holiday that they've never heard of. Yeah, like people are like, oh, okay.
Yeah,
And that's the reaction that you get. It's that, oh, you're not doing the mainstream thing, okay. And some people are like really into that, and some people are just like not thinking about it, and some people like there's just a little bit of cognitive dissonance there that like makes them see you differently. And so I think that that's yeah, and we talk about assimilation, and I guess you can see that as a form of masking, but mostly I think it's about not disclosing things that you might otherwise would have done. Does that feel reasonable, Rena?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just in my head as well, because um, we're practicing Hindus, but we go to church in the morning on Christmas Day. We do a full roast dinner, and we sing Christmas carols before we eat. So anyone would think they're walking into a very different household. But if you go upstairs, there's a temple with all the deities. So yeah, it's yeah.
You're engaging with Christmas way more than I intend to do.
Yeah.
yeah. I think from our experience of supporting some of the people, on the pathway program on NDSA, and from what Rena and Vanessa were saying, and Sarah, there is, of course, this additional factor in that some of these people, they don't have a safe space to return to remove the mask. Spaces that are supposed to be safe actually push them to mask further. and that must be extremely damaging, on many levels in terms of self-esteem, in terms of own identity, being able to recognize being congruent to yourself. Yeah.
Absolutely, Maria, you've articulated that beautifully. That people often assume that home is everyone's safe space, but actually home can be a source of significant oppression if you're not accepted for who you are.
But fortunately, there are groups like NDSA and the Autistic Empire and Second Voice, another group. One of the charity, Autism Voice, that Vanessa mentioned, run by Mariama Conde. Yeah, it's great as well in London. Yeah, she's been on our program as a speaker as well.
Yes, I love her. Although Autism Voice is also primarily for parents
Yes.
and their children.
Yeah.
And Odo, I really would like a Black autistic adult group of people who are meeting. We just haven't been able to get it together yet.
Yes.
The only way is up.
Yeah. Any more questions? So thank you so much for coming and talking to us so articulately. And so, we had a great insight and understanding, and there is, I think, energy and hope for the autistic community, because you highlight how we can support each other. Yeah. How autistic people can support each other, and that's very important.
Marie, can I just say something? I've put it again in the chat. I just think it's so important that we all stick together, because if we get divided into smaller and smaller fractions, nobody's going to hear our voice. We have to all recognize within one another, despite our many differences, whatever our color of our skin or our cultural or religious backgrounds, we are fundamentally all the same. We're autistic. And to stand together and don't allow ourselves to be divided into ever smaller little groups, and then nobody's going to hear us. We have to all be standing together and supporting one another, as you say.
I agree. If I could just come in on that, I agree. Like, the Autistic Empire is for all autistic adults, but within that, like, you've got to create an inclusive space. And so, people end up creating smaller groups because sometimes you do just want to hang out with people like you.
Yeah, absolutely. But always have a hand extended to the rest of the autistic community, even if you like to be in. You recognize that you are part of a bigger thing. And to stand together, to campaign together, to get our voices heard.
Yeah.
I do agree. I think at the same time, though, it's really important to see that even though in some spaces you may be marginalized because of your autistic identity, actually there may well be others who are multiply marginalized, and it's not an oppression Olympics. It's not about who's having a worse experience, but it is incumbent upon all of us to understand and accept that for some people, even coming to something like this, is really hard, and and to just accept that's okay. Not everybody is an advocate, especially if you've been raised with every decision about your life having been made for you and you've never had agency to make decisions. It's not uncommon, particularly I see in my coaching work, people don't know what they want because they've never had the privilege of asking themselves what they want and understanding what they need, and it's a really slow process. So I guess it's just and I say that, and I'm not, this is not me and you, this is all of us. That I have loads of work, but I can say that I am definitely engaging with it and doing my best each day to be a better ally to people from who have other intersecting identities. But I don't think anyone's exempt from that, but certainly, Wade, I agree that if we can create spaces where we accept that for some people, autism is shameful at this moment, and for others, it's the most empowering thing ever, and it's all okay.
Yeah.
And yes, absolutely.
Ah, yeah.
Hi. I had a question that I'm trying to put into words, which was about what you're saying about it's very difficult to keep support groups together and keep them going and get the word out. And I was wondering if is there any practical advice that you have for like how we can help with that? Because I think in this group especially, we've been talking a lot about how to give back. So not just how to access resources, but how to spread awareness of resources or how to campaign for them to get funding. And especially I think because there's so much of like a movement at the moment towards separating everyone, towards turning the most oppressed people in society against each other. And it's really hard to fight against that and to be vocal about being in a minority when, you know, like the village next to mine, every time I drive through it, there's all these flags up. It's like every single lamppost, someone's painted their whole house in a Union Jack flag. And even though I'm not an immigrant, I'm very white and very British, it makes me very uncomfortable. And it's just like speaking out in my physical local community about being in a minority feels dangerous. And I wondered if there was any support, like any advice on how to speak up about it and get the word out whilst also protecting yourself emotionally.
I'm going to defer to you, Sarah, first, because you've obviously built an entire organization on this.
I would say, in my experience, not just of starting the Autistic Empire, but all of the autistic groups, peer-led autistic groups I've seen come and go in the last 8 years, is that if you want to start a local group, you should brand it, and you should not brand it on you. Because I have seen a lot of Facebook pages or people sort of coming up with particular things that are based around people coming to hang out with them. And the nature of ADHD is that many people will hit ideas full frontal, running headlong, get super into it, pour in loads and loads of energy. It all dies within 8 months, and then they decide to go and do something else. And that is the way that ADHD people work a lot of the time, and that's fine. But if that's how you work, then you need to be able to put all of your energy into it for 6 months and get it to a point where you can then hand it over to someone else. And I've seen a lot of groups just crash and burn in exactly the same way over and over and over again, because you got one enthusiastic founder who like just ran out of puff and moved on to do something else. Didn't even burn out, like just lost interest and didn't have the dopamine for it anymore. And so if you want to start a local group, then you need to be thinking from the very outset about sustainability of it, and how you're going to, you know, if you're going to commit to it for years, or if like you're going to commit to it for a year and like you're looking for other people who are going to like hold co-leadership, or, you know, a successor, or, you know, whatever you're specifically like as a human being. I'm absolutely someone, I'm 36 now, and like, you know, I've started loads of things and groups that like didn't last very long because I'm terribly ADHD. And when it came to founding the Autistic Empire, I was like, this can't be based on my genius. Like, you know, it's got to be sustainable, and it's still here 8 years later. And I can't say it was an entirely smooth journey, but I'm not gonna talk about the pitfalls of that in this session. You'll have to join and ask me about it. Yeah, I think really thinking about the sustainability of it, and on the most basic level, coming up with a cool, memorable name that you can put on a poster and then like stick up in your local Tesco, is the most basic, simplest way to just get one running. Because a lot of the a lot of the problem that we've got is just finding the people that we need. It's not that they aren't there, there are loads and loads and loads of people there, and they really, really, really want to get involved in their local community. It's just a case of finding them. I've just moved to Borehamwood, and I've promised people who collared me at the autism show that I will start a Borehamwood autism group. And it's like, where am I going to start? And the answer is I'm going to work out what my local venue is going to be. I'm going to tell people that it's going to be at the same time, in the same place, like every month, and then I'm going to put up posters in Barnet Mencap, Barnet Mind, and the local gaming shop, and I'm going to see like who's gonna get in touch, and that's like as basic as it needs to start, and then you create complexity as it builds. I think I've had so many young autistic people sort of bounce up to me and say like, I've got this great idea, I'm going to start this organization, we're going to apply for big lottery funding, and we're going to have £6 million like over the next 3 years. And I'm like, you're not, you've got absolutely no background or knowledge of how you're going to do this. You're very much kind of like idea, question mark, profit. And it's like you've got to, I did this, like I am this person. I started 2 charities by the age of 23, and so I've learned the hard way that like it just doesn't work like that for most people, if you don't have a leg up. So I think start small, make sure that you know what you're doing. If you're in this meeting, then I think you've definitely got a good start, and think about the sustainability of it.
I wonder also whether, Sarah, whether actually, rather than starting something from scratch, and another option is also to bolt onto an organization that you might already be part of, whether that's a faith group or whether that's, say, for example, in my community, there's at least 3 female business networking organizations. So if you were going to that, and and one of those networking meetups was one for neurodivergent entrepreneurs, and then see who turns up, or you talk about it at one of those things, and you just kind of bring in the subject, even if it's from a support capacity initially. So how can we make these networking meetings more neuro inclusive? Everybody sat down on chairs for the whole time. Actually, what about some permission at the beginning to say, if you need to move around, that's okay. And actually, if this type of environment is not, if it's too big, can we do smaller groups or whatever? But if you're already part of a group, is there scope to see how you can make it more neuro inclusive rather than starting something,
Absolutely. But that's separate to creating a group. And if you're within a large organization, because I was asked about, sort of starting a more local group, but like if you're in a large organization, I would recommend, if you've got the stomach for it, going and loudly talking about autism in as many venues as possible and collecting people who respond positively, because that's how I founded the neurodivergent staff network in my trust. I just wandered around a lot of teams saying autism, anyone, and then eventually had enough people that I was able to kind of get them all in a room and start a group that's now meeting monthly and has done for 18 months. So it can be, I mean, I wouldn't say it was easy, but it can be as simple as that, definitely. And I wouldn't recommend branching out unless you've got a unique selling point of what it is that you want to do. I'm going to a meeting tomorrow with someone who joined an online autism group who wants to do a much more political policy advocacy thing. So he's taken a bunch of people out of that meeting and said, we're going to go have a meeting in Ealing. So absolutely, you can bolt on to larger groups. And if you want to start a local group and you want to get the support of the Autistic Empire for it, get in touch.
Sarah and Rena, can I just say thank you very much for some absolutely excellent advice, because we're all now coming towards the end of the pathway course, and this is a sort of very, very much the area that we've been talking about with Marie, in trying to get, if you like, something bolted on to NDSA, in the way of online meetings and things to continue, so that we can start and have a group that will be able to provide the similar sort of contact and support that we've achieved as being part of this group. So the advice that you've given us there, I just think has been, real pearls of wisdom. So thank you so much. I mean, I for one would be happy if we could just get a few coffee mornings going, and say the advice about the sustainability, I think, is incredibly useful. That it hasn't to be just a one-man band. It's got to be, you've got to get a group of people together who are going to be able to take it forwards. And I speak and I recognise entirely the ADHD profile of blind enthusiasm, and then with equal rapidity it can all fall apart. So I recognise that entirely. So I'm really quite keen that shouldn't be the fate of any groups that we do set up. But that's very much the aim of a lot of us in this group now, is to try and get something together which we can bolt on to NDSA, because I am super aware of the lack and the difficulty with funding. So even some of the groups that we do have operating at the moment via NDSA, they're all subject to funding, and once the funding runs out, then the coordinators for the coffee meetups, they may not be there. So again, I think it's incumbent upon us to be prepared to take over from the pump priming that NDSA has done, and to keep these groups going. I mean, I found them to be absolutely invaluable. It's been one of the key parts of this course that has helped me so much. So this idea of bolting something on to a pre-existing structure, I think, is fantastic. And so I hand that to Marie.
Yes,
to make even more work for you.
Yes, we'll definitely, thank you, Rina and Sarah, for great advice and sharing your experience. We will take this forward, and we will, as we discussed last meeting, we will organize a short training program for everyone who wants to organize a group where we'll talk about safeguarding. We'll talk about the structure and how to, how to create a structured environment that is autism friendly. As Sarah was saying, in a totally unstructured way, it can be difficult for autistic people to slide in. Yeah, so to create some structure to the group initially, where people can find a way to engage with it, and as well as DBS checks and things like that. So we will move this forward. Thank you again.
Could I just say that I am so relentlessly optimistic about the development of the autistic community. Like when I started in this 15 years ago, like people, there were some websites, like there were some people who spoke to each other, and in the last 15 years, like it's just so dramatically different that people who aren't autistic will talk to each other about like neurodivergence and speculating on these things, and it's just so much easier now, and it's still not easy, but it really does feel like the brighter future is coming, and it's you can literally see it on the horizon now. You just have to step into it. So thank you very much for having me on, and thank you guys for all of the efforts that you're going to bring to the struggle.